evening, everybody. Nice time to be church. Let's go. Glad to see you all again. Andy went out and got some fancy donuts this morning. Did you guys see those things?
Happy time.
Will everybody get seated? Well, I hope you guys all had a good week last week. And we're going to have a great morning this morning. Let's go ahead and pray. Father, we do thank you so much for the opportunity to get together, just put our attention to you. Lord, we do pray for just peace in our hearts and minds this morning. Get rid of the distractions so we can focus on you. We do pray for Andy as he speaks, that you just empower him with your Holy Spirit, that he would speak what you want him to speak. We would listen and apply these things so that we can be more Christ-like, more like your Son. God, we thank you so much for everything that you give to us in our life. Thank you this morning. We don't own anything. You just lend it to us. Everything we have, everything that we are, it comes from you. And we're so grateful for that. We thank you that you are a gracious and merciful God. And we love you so much. We pray this in your Son's name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
So, off those 4 songs, can anybody guess what we're talking about this morning? Yeah, resurrection from the dead. Yeah, there's been, all 4 songs had to do with that. So I just wondered if you were going to get that subliminal, kind of that low. Yeah. Oh. Well, we're continuing talking about the miracles of Jesus, and today we're getting to a pretty famous one, and it's a really neat miracle, and it's only found in the Gospel of John. So it's a longer passage of Scripture, so stay with me. It's 46 verses long. So Tim has already memorized it, and we're going to allow him to just quote it for us. I know you've got one of the verses memorized in this passage. Boom! Ruby nailed it.
That's probably the limit.
That's right, you got it. How'd you guess that one? That's great. Yep, we're in John 11, and we're going to start looking in verse number 1. It says, a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick. Jesus knew this family pretty well, and in fact, he's really close to this family, and now one of them gets sick. Verse 3. So the 2 sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. And when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. When I read that this week, I don't know how many times I've read this story, studied this story, preached this story, and I don't know that it ever kicked into me that Jesus said at the beginning that his sickness would not end in death. But what happens? He died. But it didn't end there. So it's not the end of the story. So Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. So although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed there for the next 2 days. Finally, he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. But his disciples objected. Rabbi, they said, only a few days ago the people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going there again? Jesus replied, there are 12 hours of daylight every day. During the day, people can walk safely. They can see because they have the light of this world. But at night, there's danger of stumbling because there's no light. And he said, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. But now, I'll go wake him up. The disciples said, Lord, if he's sleeping, he will soon get better. They thought Jesus meant Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant Lazarus had died. So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Jesus had to kind of speak plain to these guys, kind of like he has to do to us sometimes, doesn't he? He kind of tries to lead us. And if you're anything like me, I'm a little hard-headed at times. I know that shocks you, right? But Jesus had to sit these guys down and be like, nope, he's dead. And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. For now you will really believe. Come, let's go see him. Thomas, nicknamed the Twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go too and die with Jesus. I mean, you can almost feel the sarcasm. I mean, I don't believe this was Thomas standing up with great faith, saying, let's go die with Jesus. I don't see that in here. Thomas was also known as what? Doubting Thomas, not the man of great faith. So I can see him kind of just sitting there in the back going, oh, let's just go die with Jesus. And when Jesus arrived at Bethany, verse 17, he was told that Lazarus had already been in the grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people who had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus told her, your brother will rise again. Yes, Martha said, he will rise when everyone else rises at the last day. Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha? Yes, Lord, she told him. I have always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God. And she returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, the teacher is here and wants to see you. So Mary immediately went to him. Jesus stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep. So they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. Same thing her sister said. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. Where have you put him? He asked them. And they told him, Lord, come and see. Then, there it is, Ruby's verse. Jesus wept. And the people who were standing nearby said, see how much he loved him. But some said, this man healing a blind man, couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying? Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb, a cave with the stone rolled across its entrance. Rolling the stone aside, Jesus told them, but Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible. Yeah. You ever been around something that just stank? There's nothing that stinks like death. When I lived in Kentucky, you guys know I grew up in Kentucky and I loved to hunt. And so I would bow hunt, and our deer season opened the first weekend in September. So it could be hot. And it was hot that first weekend. I think we were in the mid-90s. And I shot a deer, and that's how, I didn't make a lot of money at that time, and still don't make a lot of money, but really didn't make much money then. And that's how we fed our family. That was our meat. So I would shoot them, we processed them, we butchered them, we did everything, we put it in the freezer, and that's how we fed our family. So I butchered this deer, and I hung it up and did all that, processed it. And I took the skeleton and the skin and everything, and the dumpster at the church, because we lived next door to the church, the dumpster got emptied every Monday morning. So this was Monday morning, and I thought the dumpster guy hadn't been here yet. There was still some stuff in there. I thought, perfect. Threw that carcass in the dumpster, didn't think about it. It was in the 90s all week, and the dumpster guy didn't come. And about Wednesday, my dad came looking for me and told me, I don't know what it is. I don't want to know what it is. Get it taken care of. You could smell it as soon as you pulled onto the church property. And the dumpster was all the way around the back of the building. I mean, it was not, but you could smell it. And it was bad. And I was in a lot of trouble. And so whenever I read this story, I think about that deer in that dumpster when it was almost 100 degrees. It stank. And when I read this, I see that, and I'm like, oh, the smell was terrible. I know that smell. I don't do well with smells. It was going to be bad. So what happens? Jesus responded, "Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe?" So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus, looking up at heaven, said, "Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me. But I said it out loud for the sake of these people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me." Then Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out!" And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in headcloth. And Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him go." I've heard all kinds of preachers preach on this passage and heard people talk about this story and say that, Jesus said, "Lazarus, come out," because if he just said come out, everybody would have come out. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds really cool. But that's what Jesus did. He yells, "Lazarus, come out," and Lazarus actually came out. Many of the people who were there with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. I would say so. Wouldn't you believe if you saw something like that? Jesus raising somebody from the dead? But some went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Some of the people decided they were going to get the religious folks involved, and we've looked at this 6 ways to Sunday about every time that the religious people get involved, what happens? Trouble, yeah. It's not pretty. The religious people, the people who should have been the most excited for the miracles Jesus performed, get ticked. And that's what's going to happen here. In fact, they begin to plan Jesus' death. But this is a cool miracle, bringing somebody back to life who had been dead. And there were several times in my life that I wished I could see that happen. I wished that this miracle could have been performed with people around me. I think back to when my grandfather passed away. I was very, very close with my grandfather. I mean, very, very close. When I was a boy, I fell into his pond, and my grandfather pulled me out, and I was pronounced dead and was brought back. I think about that. I would pick him up, and we'd go to lunch all the time, and he and I were very, very, very close. And I could wish, I remember standing at his funeral at the side of the caskets thinking, this would be so awesome if Jesus raised him from the dead. I'm sure there's been times in your life when you've thought something similar to that, when you've lost somebody who was close to you. And we pray and we pray and we pray for God to heal them, and then they pass away. And we stand there by their grave, we stand there by their casket, and we can't help but ask, why, God? You missed your chance to heal them. You missed the deadline to show up. And that's why I call this miracle when God misses your deadline. We all have deadlines that we feel like God needs to act by. God, I need you to show up, and I need you to do it at this time. And that's what the two sisters said to Jesus, right? Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And it'd be easy for us to armchair quarterback, Monday morning quarterback Jesus every time with every one of his miracles, but especially with this one. Jesus, if you had just been there. And we could think that way in our own circumstances and in our own situations when we're standing next to someone we love's casket. Jesus, if you'd have only showed up, we wouldn't be standing here right now. We wouldn't have lost this person. And every week I give you the big idea of the miracle, and here's the big idea of this miracle today. God's delays are not proof of his absence. Sometimes Jesus allows situations to become impossible, so only he can get the glory when resurrection comes. Because he's the only one who can do it, right? If God showed up many times today when we're with someone struggling with a physical issue and they're close to death, they're about to die, If somehow they made a miraculous turnaround, what would people say? Man, you had some good doctors. Man, there was that one procedure they did, that one medicine they gave you, turned it all around. But when you're dead, I've not met any doctors who can fix that. When you're dead, the only one who can get the glory is Jesus. And we all love to see miracles. We love to talk about miracles. We love to see them happen until they take too long. It's just like, we've been doing church now for about 4 years, isn't it? And so for the first 3 years, I struggled with that internal bleed where I was exhausted all the time and none of the doctors could figure it out, right? I every Friday, go check in at KU, get 2 units of blood and a bag of iron every Friday night, stay till Saturday morning, go home Saturday morning, study for church, church is Sunday, and just like the gas tank in your car, throughout the week, my gas tank would get empty, and on Friday I'd go back and get a refill. And I think about, man, I can't tell you how many times I prayed for God to heal me. You guys prayed for God to heal me. Every pastor I know in America prayed for God to heal me. A millionaire friend that I have in Cincinnati flew our whole family to Atlanta, Georgia for this specific event and this specific preacher to pray over us. God didn't heal me. 3 years. So at the end of that time, I had everything in order. I planned my funeral out. I was ready because God didn't show up. And then God showed up. Did it through a doctor from Mayo Clinic. And would I have loved to see God just heal me completely right outright? Absolutely, I would have loved that. But he didn't choose to. We love to see miracles. We love the breakthroughs, the healings, the answered prayers, the restoration. We love all of that. But what do we hate? We hate waiting. I am not a patient person. Are you?
Yes.
You are, Bill? I knew you were. Pat's the patient one. To be married to Bill takes patience. I'm not real patient. And we hate waiting. We hate the silence because it feels like God's not answering. We hate the uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen. We hate the disappointment when God doesn't show up. We hate watching things get worse. That's exactly what happened here in John 11. Lazarus is sick. Mary and Martha, I'm sure they did everything they could. They talked to every doctor in town. They probably called everybody together and they were praying for him. And then they send word to Jesus. What happens? Jesus doesn't come. At least not immediately. Didn't have a sense of urgency. Jesus was not on Mary and Martha's timeline. And here's the tension of the whole passage. Jesus could have prevented this funeral, but instead he planned a resurrection. And some of us, we get frustrated with God because our marriage is still struggling. We get frustrated with God because it feels like our prayers are not getting answered, because the healing we've been praying for ourselves or for our loved one hasn't happened. We get frustrated because our breakthrough hasn't come and our opportunity feels like it's died. Our dream, we had to bury it because it just didn't happen. And it feels like God, it feels like heaven, it feels like Jesus missed the miracle. He missed the deadline. He showed up late. But in John 11, this passage teaches us something that's really powerful for us to understand. And that is that Jesus never panicked by what feels too late. Was Jesus late? No, he's right on his time. He's right on his schedule. So in this story, there's a couple things I want us to see. Here's the first one in John 11, verse 3. It says, the 2 sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. The first thing I want us to see in the story today is that God's delay is not God's rejection. Just because God didn't show up, just because Jesus didn't show up on their timeline, was not Jesus rejecting their prayer. In fact, Jesus stayed for 2 more days, and he just waited. Honestly, that kind of feels offensive, doesn't it? Why would Jesus do that? Why would he let this family, a family of people who Jesus loved, why would he let them go through the suffering of watching their brother die? I mean, imagine the disciples. They're 2 days waiting. Jesus, what are you doing here? Your friend's dying. And Jesus basically says, we're just going to wait. That doesn't fit our theology very well. Because we assume that love means immediate action. We assume that care means this immediate rescue where Jesus is going to drop everything and take care of what we need. And delay for us feels like abandonment. Well, where are you? Did you forget about me again? Do you not care anymore? Do you even hear me? But verse 5 and 6 are kind of fascinating. So although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed there, or stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Did you catch that? He loved them, so he delayed. That changes everything. Sometimes God delays because he's building deeper faith. Or sometimes he delays because he's exposing false foundations inside of us, false expectations. Or he's preparing us for a greater glory, or he's doing something eternal instead of something temporary. And we get upset. If Jesus walked into Lazarus while he has this fever and he's sick, and he reached down and healed this fever that Lazarus had, people would have been like, oh yeah, that's a cool miracle. But if he raises a man who's been dead for 4 days, that's not just a cool miracle. That changes theology. That's like, holy cow. Dude's been dead for 4 days. And some of us, we get angry because God didn't answer the version of the prayer that we prayed. Because we want God to step in early when the pain's not bad and when the situation isn't final and when everything can just turn around real easy and we don't have to struggle at all. But instead, God had a bigger miracle in mind. Look at verse 21. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd only been here, my brother would not have died. That brings me to the second thing that jumped out at me in the story, and that's that Jesus can handle our honest frustration. Martha runs to Jesus and says, Jesus, this is on you. This is your fault. My brother's dead because of you. And she's upset. And I love this passage because nobody in this story acts spiritual. They're not faking it. They're not, Mary cries. Martha questions, the crowd mourns, Jesus wept, and nobody's walking around saying, oh, bless you, it's going to be all right. No. People were hurting. And Jesus didn't rebuke them, yell at them, get on to them, anything for their honesty. Let me tell you something that helped me, and I think it'll help you. God's not intimidated by your questions or your doubts. In fact, he encourages them. Bring your questions and your doubts. That's why we have our church the way we have our church. We encourage people, bring your questions, bring your doubts, and we talk about them, right? At the end of every service, what do? We talk it over. Yeah, bring it. If Jesus encouraged them, we should too. Well, what if we don't know the answer? Well, guess what? I don't have all the answers. I know who does. But if we don't have the answer, at least we can encourage each other. And we're there for each other. We listen to each other. But some of us grew up in a little different way. I grew up in a way where you don't question God. He's sovereign and he's in control, and you deal with it. Don't wrestle with your faith. You just believe blindly. You don't admit when you're frustrated. You never admit disappointment. And you never yell at God. The Bible's full of hurting people who talk honestly to God. And Jesus steps into their pain. In fact, the shortest verse in the Bible is what? Jesus wept. The NLT says, then Jesus wept. The King James says, Jesus wept. There's actually one verse in the Greek that's shorter than this verse. But it's the shortest verse in the English Bible. And that verse matters. Jesus knew that the resurrection was coming. Jesus knew he was going to raise Lazarus. But he wept anyways. He still cried. Why? He knew what he was about to do. He knew he was about to see Lazarus. Why do you think Jesus cried? I think it's because Jesus isn't emotionally disconnected from our human suffering. He loved Martha and Mary. Yes?
Actually, Jesus cried because he saw all the other people crying.
Probably. Yeah, you're right, Joe. Thank you, buddy. Yeah, he's not disconnected from us emotionally. When he saw Mary and Martha and the others crying, it moved something inside of him. I like that he's listening. I love that our kids listen and learn. So, theology without compassion becomes religion. And none of us want to just be religious. Jesus doesn't just work miracles, he enters the pain and he walks through it with us. Here's the third thing that jumped out at me. Jesus often waits until human ability runs out. Like I said, if Jesus walked in and healed Lazarus when he was just had the sniffles, oh yeah, Jesus, cool miracle. But when he steps in after he's been dead 4 days and buried 4 days, well, he's been in the grave for 4 days. We don't know how long he's been dead for. That's a big deal. By the time Jesus gets there, Lazarus is dead, he's buried, he's wrapped up, and he's decomposing. 4 days dead is gross and smelly. The old, in verse 39, it says, Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, Lord, he's been dead for 4 days, so he has been dead 4 days and buried. The smell will be terrible. The old King James, you know what it says? He stinketh. He stinketh. I love that. That's so, yeah. That's funny. But it's true. Some of the situations that we deal with and we go through have sat dead so long that they stink too. Maybe it's our faith. It's been sitting there dead. We haven't been using it. And to God, it stinks. Our marriage that we're not willing to put the time, effort, and energy in, and it's just coasting. It stinks. Our peace that we just seem to lose at every turn stinks. Our confidence, it stinks. Our calling, if we're not walking in it, it stinks. Our hope of what Jesus is going to do has been dead, and it stinks. And people around us have already accepted the outcome. They just stink. The funeral's over, but Jesus specializes in situations where everybody else gives up. And some of us keep asking God for CPR when he wants to do a miracle and raise this from the dead. He's planning a resurrection. So verse 25 goes on and says, Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. What does that mean? Here's the fourth thing. Jesus is not just a miracle worker, he is resurrection. Jesus doesn't say, I'll bring the resurrection and the life. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. Not I know resurrection, not I can perform resurrection. He said, I am the resurrection. And this miracle points so much further beyond Lazarus. It points directly to Jesus' authority over death itself. This wasn't just about making one grieving family happy. It was Jesus declaring, I have power over the thing that humanity fears the most, death. And here's some deeper theology. Sin made humanity spiritually dead. So that means religion can't resurrect us. Going to church can't heal us and make us better. Rule following does not resurrect us. Church attendance cannot resurrect us. Self-help cannot resurrect us. Dead people don't need motivation. Dead people need resurrection. And that's why Christianity is not behavior modification. It's spiritual resurrection. So Jesus then in verse 43 walks up to the grave, has them roll the stone away, and he shouts what? Lazarus, come out. And that's the fifth thing. Jesus calls people out, but he also removes grave clothes. I think this is cool. As Lazarus walks out of this tomb, he's been dead in there 4 days. He walks out alive, still wrapped in the grave clothes. That's amazing by itself. But some people are alive spiritually, but they're still wearing their old grave clothes. We love Jesus, but we're still wrapped up in shame. We love Jesus, but we're still wearing our insecurity. We love Jesus, but we're wearing our addiction, or we're wearing our bitterness, or our fear, or our church hurt, or our old identity. But notice, Jesus gives life instantly, but the grave clothes come off progressively. That's discipleship. Church should be a place where people can unwrap. They can get this crap off of them. It's not a place where dead people are judged for still looking messy. It's a place for us to get our grave clothes taken off. And that's why our church exists. We're not shocked when broken people show up. Especially when they show up broken. Those are the people that Jesus is after. We didn't start our church so that we could pull people from 15 churches within 5 miles. I'm not interested in pulling people out of other churches. I don't care. We are here to help people who are far from Jesus. That's why we are where we are. What's next door? I almost said, do you think there's church people next door? But there probably is. That's sad. So, what I'd like for you to do today is to ask yourself this. Where have I assumed God abandoned me because he delayed? What situation in my life feels too dead right now? Am I being 100% honest with God about my frustrations? What grave clothes am I still walking around wrapped up in? And do I still trust Jesus even when he misses my deadline? Sometimes we can walk into church and we feel buried like Lazarus. I feel like we got the weight of the world on us. Like we're wrapped up in those grave clothes so tight that we can't even move. Not physically, but emotionally and spiritually and mentally. And maybe your biggest frustration is just looking at God saying, God, where are you? It feels like you're nowhere near me. But John 11 reminds us that Jesus may not always meet our timeline, but he's never absent from our story. He may not show up when I think he should show up, but he's in my story. So when Jesus walked to Bethany, death lost, hopelessness lost, and ultimately the grave lost. And if Jesus can stand outside a tomb and call a dead man out, he can still stand next to me and speak into my situation and call me out too. Because when God misses my deadline, it may be because he's planning a resurrection instead of a rescue.